Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. If you are new here, we are all about optimizing the health and performance of the ageless athlete. We have tons of different guests from the medical, performance, and exercise community. So if you're into that type of thing, please subscribe. In today's episode, Scott Hagnes and I are breaking down our day of nutrition. What are our goals with our nutrition, but what are we actually eating and drinking to fuel that goal? Guys, if you like today's podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, share with a friend, and enjoy this episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
It's going good. Other than I seem to be lacking light here today, but whatever.
Where we make up for in light, Scott, we produce more intellect. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, more golden nuggets and more shining through there. Scott,
exactly.
I think it'd be awesome to take an opportunity to share with the audience what our diet and nutrition looks like, because, we're along in this process as well. And we've probably changed a lot in the last, let's say 10, 20 years, et cetera. And, you and I both tinker around with stuff. And I'm actually curious to see what your diet looks like right now relative to what mine is and what it was and what yours has been. So let's dive into this here, Scott. So first thing I want to understand is, what is your underlying purpose of your nutrition? Right? Because I think that's important to highlight prior to us diving into exactly what we're eating, is more of the why. So can you give me more of the why behind what you're eating?
Yeah. So I think the main thing that I like to focus, or think I'm trying to achieve with what I'm doing, is having as much bioavailable energy as I can. So I'm trying to not run on fumes or make the body, prioritize various functions because it doesn't have the resources. So I try to eat foods that are easy for my body to produce energy from, contain a lot of nutrients, don't have a lot of toxins or bad stuff potentially. And I'm trying to eat as much as I possibly can without gaining weight. I'm not trying to drop body fat. I'm not trying to put on muscle. I'm basically maintaining.
Nice. So and has that always been the case, Scott? Because I know that you have different priorities and stuff like that. Like, how long has this been your goal in your nutrition?
It's honestly getting out probably 8-9 years now. I started thinking more in that terms of, increasing thyroid function, natural testosterone production, reducing stress hormones and things like that, to improve my recovery so I can still continue, because I do train overall with a pretty high volume still. And, but just generally quality of life, feeling better. And, I kind of changed my thinking around the idea of scarcity promoting longevity to actually, abundance, and trying to maintain youthful hormone output as long as possible. And even if possibly it ends up a few years shorter, if the quality of those years are better in the meantime, I'm all good with that.
That's a very good point, because I think people are becoming very dogmatic about the longevity sphere and being like, IGF as low as possible, hormones as low as possible, and just, ride that out as long as you can. But just like you said, like, there's a trade-off to that, right, Scott?
Yeah, there is. And I've done those things, as we've probably spoken on a number of times, if you've heard these before. I did all that stuff for a lot of years prior to that phase. And, now I have many years of experience there and a lot of years of experience this way. And I can say that, this feels a hell of a lot better. And, my physical output has been better, even though I'm older than I was when I did those things. And one of the things that kind of resonated for me, and I wish I could credit who I heard this from, I honestly don't remember, but it was to the effect of, a lot of these things that we're trying to do by extending longevity by the scarcity and low hormone model is essentially we're trying to model the hormonal profile of being elderly before we're elderly. And the problem is it comes along with having a lot of feelings and functions like you're elderly.
It's a great point, Scott. It's a really good point. Speaking to that, I think that it'd be important to outline here, as before we actually dive into our nutrition, that the more pro growth, pro performance that your nutrition is geared toward, the further away you're going to get to longevity. But I think what you're highlighting here, Scott, is the more closely you get to longevity and decrease metabolic function, you lead toward less quality in terms of like feeling younger, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now with that being said, let's dive into your like day of nutrition here, Scott. So, and also I guess it'd be important to let us know exactly kind of timing wise as well.
Yeah. I'll kind of lay out a normal day, and they actually are all
cool.
fairly similar, so it's not going to be that difficult. So I do tend to be somewhat of a creature of habit, but I also have the family that meld in things that they want to eat. But in a nutshell, I get up very early, and I usually eat fairly early as well. So 4:45 is breakfast for me most mornings, and it's going to be most mornings it's some form of oatmeal or rice cereal. I've long ago found I do just fine with those and feel good with that, so I do that. Usually I've got some coconut oil or butter in there for some fat and maybe some blueberries, fruits. And then we tend to eat some form of sausage for our meat in the morning, but a wide variety, mix it up. Dozens of things we probably cycle through. Sometimes if I don't feel I have enough protein, I'll throw in a little protein powder into my oatmeal. And that's probably my biggest meal of the day. And it's like 2 full servings. And then, so that'd be the first meal.
Any concern about hydration during the first part of the day there, Scott?
Oh, liquids.
Yeah.
I typically always drink a fair amount of water right when I get up. I have a cup of coffee first thing. 1 cup of black coffee is kind of my shtick. Sometimes I'll have a second one around 8 to 9 a.m. depending on the day. And then that's usually it for me.
Yep.
And I make magnesium bicarbonate water. I'm going to kind of sip on throughout the day, not exclusively, but I'm going to do that for some of my magnesium.
And what's the thought behind that there, Scott?
So kind of a natural bioavailable form of magnesium. So a lot of these are the magnesium forms we might typically take are actually artificial. They're not things we would ever really encounter in nature. They're not bad. They do work. But with that said, magnesium bicarbonates and the sulfides and things we might get through, say, seawater would really be about all we would be directly exposed to outside of, what we're getting through the foods we're eating in nature. So it's very bioavailable, and it's really pretty inexpensive. So extremely inexpensive, actually. And so it's a handy one. And then I'm going to eat again probably around 9 to 10, depending on the days and the clients and what I'm doing for training. And this is more of a snack. It'll often be some leftovers from whatever the night was before. So I'll typically have some meat, some sort of carb, almost always a piece of fruit or some fruit. I tend to eat a fair amount of fruit. Reason for that, my primary goal there is I'm really trying to keep liver glycogen stocked off so I can convert more thyroid hormone to the active form. I can detoxify better. I'm going to like less blood sugar, less erratic blood sugar. And I've also got reserves for when I train or just, any activity that I'm doing. Sometimes I'll do a shake of usually just fruit, maybe some form of milk, maybe not, depends. Maybe some nut butter of some kind, just kind of depends on what I have and what I feel like putting in. But this would be on a day that I'm doing more training, like if I'm working out and I'm going to ride, or those sorts of things, then I'll do that. Lunch, again, often leftover based, just keeps it easy. But it's going to be meat, some form of carb. Rice is a really common one. I usually try to have a fair amount of rice made up and ready to go, but I also do potatoes or sweet potatoes. Today I've got mashed potatoes sitting up there. Maybe some more fruit. I don't do a lot of added fats and haven't for a long time, a lot of years. I mean, I'm not afraid of fat, but I'm not spooning olive oil for extra calories like I used to, or I'm not looking for fatty cuts of meat, things like that. And then dinner is going to roll around 6 p.m. with the family usually. And I almost always I would say 95% of all the dinners are things I cook. And it's usually a meat, a starch, a vegetable of some kind, maybe two different vegetables, depends on what's sitting around. That kind of rounds the day out for the most part.
So Scott, what time are you usually waking up?
3:45 to 4 a.m.
No, Jesus Christ. So you're up a pretty well before the sun comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a
So
lot.
I would imagine that because there's a little bit of that going on and you're not getting that cue from the sun coming up, that maybe part of the fact that you're eating kind of gets things kicking over and moving forward a little bit, especially with the carbs in the morning.
Mhm.
And then your last meal is around 6 p.m., you said?
Usually somewhere in there.
But yeah, obviously it can extend out, starts at 6, maybe ends at 6:45, 7 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And usually no desserts or anything like that.
Yeah. Pretty rare. On Sundays, we could have a family dinner with extended family almost every week. And I'd say half to 2/3 of the time, maybe it'll be dessert then. And, well, for a special occasion, like a birthday, but I mean, we're a small family, so
Yeah.
there's not that many birthdays. So
Yeah, 3 times a year.
yeah, fairly infrequent. And some of they'll be pretty benign, like, there's talk of a baked apple for our dog's birthday here tomorrow. So.
I like that. And in terms of, aside from the magnesium bicarbonate and then a couple cups of coffee in the morning, no other real liquids that you're drinking throughout the day?
I mean, depending on my training and the weather, I sometimes do certain juices.
Oh, okay. So
Or,
again,
easy
topping off the
bioavailable
glycogen
carbs.
also.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, but it totally depends. Like now that the weather's gone a bit south, and I'm doing less aerobic work, so I don't have anything aerobic really on the schedule. I don't have any right now, and there isn't any sitting around because I don't feel I need it right now.
Yeah. And last one, any supplements that you're taking right now, Scott?
Yeah, I've been playing with a few more supplements than before. Shilajit I've been taking since early summer, which has been pretty phenomenal. I think just rich source of fulvic acid and a lot of bioavailable minerals. In a kind of more natural carbon bonded type format. Doing some vitamin K.
Yep.
And a little E.
Okay.
Would be the main things.
Have you
played around with some boron?
Oh.
I never supplemented boron. I did that for a number of months. I just ran out, so I'll probably take a break for a bit, but that's what I have been doing.
Yep. And so do you have an idea of like ballpark range of how much like water you're taking in, or at least liquids you're taking in throughout the day? Or is it more by feel for you?
I go by feel. Yeah, I don't really measure it out, and I go by looking, trying to keep my urine color within kind of I don't want it to be clear. I don't want it to be, bright yellow either. And I did go through a phase where I was using a refractometer to check, on concentration of solid, various things. And I kind of learned a few years ago, and I kind of learned what means what. So I just go by look now.
Yep. So now it's kind of like weighing your food for a few days and you're like, okay, I can eyeball it from here.
That's pretty much what I do. Yeah,
for sure. Okay. And energy wise, do you have like any big dips in the day that you kind of can see ahead of time? You're like, usually around, a couple times a week, around 3 or 4 or anything like that? Or are you pretty consistent?
I'm really pretty consistent. I mean, I used to have them in the afternoon and certain tired days. And, I don't know if it's just I've dialed things in or, over the years getting, the breathing better along with, probably better mineral balance and rid of long-term polyunsaturated fats in my tissues. Who knows what exactly, but I really don't have issues with any digestion. I really have very rare do I have energy swings. I get a little tired in the evening, but it's long days. So I think that's fine. Yeah, you're kind of supposed to, I fall asleep easily. I stay asleep well now, which hasn't always been the case.
And what time is usually your bedtime?
Well, we usually lay down somewhere in the 7 o'clock range. And so I'm usually out anywhere from 8 to 8:45 would be when
Nice.
I'd be falling asleep. The last night I went to sleep, I think I was out by 7:45. So a little
Wow.
earlier.
Okay. So, your last meal is anywhere between like an hour to, or an hour and a half probably before you go to sleep.
Maybe, yeah, before I actually fall asleep. But
Yep.
they have trained it a little closer to the end of the day than probably what they had historically been, just based on schedules and things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So, for
Yeah,
me,
I am curious for what you're
oh
up to
yeah,
these
man.
days.
I'm
Yeah.
like a little mad scientist over here. So obviously,
Yeah.
my overall goal right now is longevity, and then just maximizing my human like performance. And what I mean by human performance is being like the best person I can be. So having energy for my clients, to do activities with my son, to show up as a husband and all those things. So like the energy that I would have put into training is now being put into like my life and my family. So that's definitely different than what I've been doing for the last like decade, right? So probably from like 2000, oh geez, like like I was like 2000, no, 2000, no, 2004, no. So like in high school, just to kind of give you some background, I would say probably 6 or 7 months out of the year, I would be really focused on weight management, which looking back on it was horrific from 2000 to 2004, especially from wrestling. And even in off season, I would make weight for wrestling tournaments and have to, drop weight in the middle of the summer. So my senior year, I wrestled 145 pounds, and I think I was playing football at like 165. So, and the last football game was, let's say, right around Halloween. And then we had weight certifications 3 weeks later, maybe even less. And what that meant was you had to literally show up, get skin fold tested, do a urine test to make sure that you had adequate amounts of hydration in your system, and then step on the scale. And then they basically do an equation to see what your body fat currently is and what your lowest allowed body fat could be to actually make weight. So they kind of do that in New York to make sure kids aren't losing too much of a substantial amount of body weight. And I believe 6% body fat is the cutoff. But if you show up at like, let's say 4 or 5% and hydrated, you can do that weight class. So like, it was 3 weeks of, all right, I got to get my shit together and figure out how to get to down to my weight that I have to weigh in at for sectionals, divisionals and sectionals in February. So like usually during the season, like you naturally just by the sheer amount of volume, you lose anywhere between like 5 and 10% of your body weight. But I had to do that in like 2 or 3 weeks. So that was like the norm for me, and doing it completely haphazardly, not really knowing what the heck I was doing, definitely smashed my thyroid in the process, and did all sorts of other probably pretty detrimental metabolic things to my body. Oh, and by the way, that was just the weight cutting. That wasn't the hours of training every day. Sometimes 2 practices a day. I mean, that I was putting my body through a lot. And that was in high school alone. And then fast forward to college, where I was playing lacrosse and didn't have nearly as much of an emphasis in terms of weight management. It was more about trying to get as big, as strong, and as fast as possible. And that's where my weight was anywhere between 170 and 180. I think like my heaviest in college, I was like 178, 179. And literally a week later, once practice started, I was down to 175. And by the end of the season, I was running around at 170. So just the volume of practice and conditioning and that kind of stuff. That's also when I think upper body wise, I was probably my strongest. My lower body was still pretty terrible. And I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but I'll circle this back here. Then after college, that was when triathlon came up. I had to smash a lot of calories, but I was still probably was under eating substantially for the amount of work I was doing there, training upwards of 5-6 hours in a day, and probably requiring about like 500 calories an hour of training. So I was definitely under eating there, because I should have been having like 7,000-8,000 calories, was probably having like 4,000 maybe. And then switching into CrossFit in 2010, where it's metabolic training, weight training, skill work, aerobic training, I mean, a lot of everything. And then
So many
1 to
facets,
2
yeah.
to even 5 training sessions in a day, depending on the time of the year. And, you know, along the way, I've had digestive problems. So in college, I was hospitalized with like a severe case of gastritis. I mean, it felt like, you know, my intestinal lining was no good. Not my intestinal, my stomach lining was no good. And then fast forward to after college, that's when I was hospitalized again with like gallbladder attacks and like pancreatic attacks from not only the volume of training, but that's when I switched to like more of like a whole grain, like 80% whole grain diet. And I just probably wasn't processing things, and along with the stress, just putting a shitload of stress on my liver and my gallbladder to like keep up. And then I switched my diet completely in 2009, 10 to more of a paleo diet. And thankfully that all those like gallbladder attack type things all went away. So that was like a big step for me. But dairy was never awesome for me. Like I would do it and then, you know, have repercussions afterward. And now fast forward to now, where in the morning I get up, usually I'm up at anywhere between 5 and 6. More recently, since being on exogenous testosterone, I feel like I don't need as much sleep. Like I'm restful. I go to bed at 10 and I'm up, let's say at 5. And I really am like, wow, I feel good. Like I don't have that need to just stay into bed. So I'm up at like between 5 and 6, black coffee. Supplements I'm taking right now, I was doing berberine, biosin. So basically just like an anti-yeast herbal protocol with some glutamine also for secretory IgA, upregulation and function, vitamin D plus K, because I'm
these some of these are relevant to are from last week's, right, where we talked about the test of your yeah. So that makes sense. This is kind of the RX for that. Right?
Yeah. And then a Saccharomyces boulardii at the end of the day, once I've finished everything out. So like right before I go to bed, I'll do Saccharomyces boulardii. But as actually starting like this week, I 86 the herbal protocol because I think it might have maxed out or wasn't working anymore because I had like a reversal of some yeast overgrowth stuff and it was having really significant symptoms. So I switched to nystatin, which is a anti-yeast, but it only works in the digestive tract. It's not absorbed into your body. So it literally just stays in your digestive system, kills yeast, and then you excrete it. So I'm doing that 3 times a day instead of doing the herbal protocol, staying with the vitamin D and then the Saccharomyces boulardii in the evening. I'm doing fasting now, intermittent fasting. I start the fast anywhere between 6:30 and 7 p.m. the night before, then just water. And I'll do LMNT, the Rob Wolf, plug for Rob Wolf. I'll drink that because what I find is that when I'm fasting, my blood levels, my blood volume drops because I'm utilizing a lot of glucose. So naturally your blood volume starts to decrease. And because you're, sweating out salt, your blood volume decreases. So I felt like fatigues from just having low blood volume. So it wasn't like, oh, I need to eat something. It's just like, I feel fatigued. And since I started doing the element and taking in salt, I feel like, oh, wow. Like that, like as soon as I drink it, like 5 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I feel a lot better. So fasting, I will have a handful of either macadamia nuts or Brazil nuts at around 6 o'clock. Doesn't knock me out of my fast. Kind of like keeps me satiated. And I like to eat a little something. Brazil nuts, particularly because I want to just keep selenium levels high, though you only need like 1 Brazil nut. That's how much selenium there is in there. And then I'm rocking till anywhere between 10 and 11. I think 11 might be a little too far for me based upon the fact that I need to take in a good amount of calories in the feeding window. So I think 10 o'clock is probably appropriate for me. I can stretch it out to 11, even 12 o'clock and feel awesome. And that's the reason why I'm doing this, because like most of my activity is in the beginning part of the day. And when I'm fasted, I actually feel really good. And that's not because there's some like magic potion to fasting. Like, oh, you're this regulates or this gene is being, it's because cortisol.
Right. Your cortisol is higher, which feels good going into a training session. Yeah.
100%.
As long as it's not, like some, super mega volume or anything, if you can use it.
Yeah, for sure. So you're
yeah.
getting cortisol and epinephrine pumped into your system from fasting. There is obviously autophagy that's going on, which is one of the reasons why I want to do it, is to clean out old shit and cells and improve insulin sensitivity and all the great stuff from doing fasting, though. So the fast is anywhere between 14 hours. So I think I'm probably getting some of those benefits, but my biggest thing, and this is something that we learned together, Scott, is you've got to top off liver glycogen stores during your feeding window. Cause if you don't, and now you're going through constant gluconeogenesis, now you have persistent high cortisol levels. And that's where the fasting bites me in the ass. So I can only do this type of protocol for a week at a time and then take a day off to get it. It's straight up refeed. And then I can get back into it, because if I keep going, it basically gets to a point where I'm not sleeping. And that's how I know right away. I'm like, oh shit, I got to stop fasting, because I'm constantly putting out cortisol. I'm living off of cortisol right now.
Yeah. I recall that would happen if I went, too long. And I did it unfortunately nearly every single day, though I would mix the protocols quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that point of getting liver glycogen topped off is be super helpful. A way to get certainly benefits from it better and feel better.
And the biggest thing, the reason why this is a little bit more appropriate for me now than it was even a couple of years ago, I'm not coaching on the floor for 5 hours at a time in a hot gym. And I'm not training with nearly as much volume and frequency. My training is 30 minutes, 4 times a week. And 2 of those days are 30-minute Z2 aerobic sessions. 2 of those days are strength work with maybe a short metabolic piece, less than 10 minutes. That's it. If I tried to put any more training on top of it, I can tell right away it would destroy me, and I would just literally just get run down and sick. That's basically how it runs for me. I'm like, oh, I feel good, and I have the flu. So my breakfast is usually anywhere between 10 and 11. And because I'm breaking that fast, I'm going with a huge meal. It's my biggest meal. 2 cups of starchy carbs at least. So right now I'm running I was doing oatmeal, but because of the yeast stuff that was going on, that was really destroying me, and just terrible flatulence and gas and bloat and that kind of stuff. So I switched over to rice pudding. So homemade rice pudding. So I make the white rice. I just add a half a cup of milk, simmer that over a stove, stir it, and then maybe a little bit of water just so it softens. Little cinnamon, little vanilla extract, ton of frozen berries. Boom. It tastes very similar to oatmeal to me. It's got great consistency, and it's got carbs that I can tolerate very well in it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Along with that, 4 whole eggs, pastured eggs. Luckily enough, we have Trader Joe's that does pastured eggs. So these, especially recently, I don't know what it is. The yolks are bright orange.
Oh, wow.
They look awesome.
Legit.
And,
nice.
Which is weird because literally last week they weren't. So I'm like, maybe these are finally the pastured eggs that they've been promising. What else? We'll do a couple strips of bacon, thick cut. And that's kind of my breakfast. Water wise, I'm having about 28 to 36 ounces of water with Element. That's during the fast to keep blood volume up. And then if I train, I'll also add a shake, like a smoothie, which is about a half a cup of frozen berries, a full banana, a 8-ounce glass of cranberry juice with a scoop of whey protein and a scoop of collagen. And then I'll blend that. So my breakfast sometimes is literally that with a big ass bowl of rice pudding, bacon, and eggs. So that's how I break my fast. And let me tell you, after not eating for 12 to 14 hours, it's flipping awesome. It's so good.
I do remember fasting just amplifies how tasty whatever you're eating afterwards is.
And let me tell you, the days that I train and then I eat that, oh my God, I feel awesome. I feel really, really, really good. Then I'll try to get another feeding in 3 hours later. That's where I kind of shift more into some kind of animal meat. So either lean meats like turkey, chicken, that kind of stuff, along with sometimes maybe some ground beef, but usually it's kind of leaner. And then I'll do some like a serving of carbs there. So a potato, a cup of white rice, maybe some yuca. That's a big one for me because I tolerate it well, and there's a lot of bang.
Yeah, that's a great one if you have it available. Yeah.
Yeah, they have frozen bags of it, like already made into little French fries. So I throw it in the oven, and it's like the hardest thing about yuca is just processing it. It's like, oh, it's 89 cents a pound, but it's like this gnarly root the size of your arm that has like a.
It looks like something came off a tree branch.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, the skin can kill you because it has cyanide in it.
Yeah, you got to prepare it. Yeah.
So the frozen ones are money for me.
Wow.
And then dinner is 6 o'clock, and that's one that's been really different for me. Very low amount of protein, very high amount of starch content. So I will do like 2 to 3 cups of starch, very small serving of protein, maybe some moderate amount of fat. So like half an avocado, but like 2-3 cups of rice. And I'll put the avocado in there, maybe with some mixed vegetables, and then maybe like 2 to 3 ounces of meat. And that's it.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to ask about how many ounces you thought that was. Yeah. And so that's been rolling pretty well.
Yeah. For me, the digestion in the later part of the day and then being able to get to sleep, I'm not having to process that meat quite like the protein. Yeah. And I think that's really been helping me substantially. I picked that up from Dr. Andrew Huberman, the professor from Stanford, because he's like, oh, I eat a big carb rich meal right before sleep. And I was like, doesn't that like crush you? And it's like, well, it just pumps out a shitload of serotonin, and that's what you need to go to sleep. So obviously I'm not having sugar, like refined sugar.
Yeah.
Having a starchy carb, slowly releasing serotonin. And then that kind of cascade leads me into a pretty good night's sleep. And I'm not like waking up with like hunger pains in the middle of the night. Whereas like if I like really fasted, that's not the case for me. So yeah, that's kind of what I roll with.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I forgot to mention that I also, a few years ago tried eating a little lower protein than what I probably had for maybe a couple of decades.
I recall that.
Feel good with it. Yeah, we've talked about it before. And so that is another point. I don't eat large,
not nearly as much protein as I used to. And I think that's one of those things that when you are training, you need tons of signaling of protein growth, that. But I think as you get away from performance, I think that's one of the like easy longevity pieces that you can adapt, where you're not constantly trying to bombard your system. And it puts a burden on your digestion, having to constantly break down protein and that kind of stuff. It's just easier to digest carbs and some fats. One last thing, Scott, is I will snack on some macadamia nuts and Brazil nuts to just get easy bang for buck calories in. And by the way, if you are a person who has like muscle wasting, or just like you have a tendency of like losing a lot of weight very easily, having nut butters and nuts around is just like a lifesaver. It's just so easy to be able to slam like 500 calories in like 3 handfuls. So I know that's some people out there. Yeah, it's some people out there. But yeah, man, I think this is a cool little conversation, Scott. And I think this can go many ways from here. And I know that we're definitely always tinkering around and adopting new ideas. So Scott, if somebody has more questions about nutrition, how can they work with you?
You can reach out to me, email me, scotthagnus@gmail.com, or DM me on Instagram at scotthagnus.training.
And I'm Sean LaFlock. You give me a Flock Fitness on all the social medias, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, the Twitters, all that kind of stuff. And for at home or virtual personal training, flockfitness.com. Scott, thank you so much for your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you. It was a good one.
Yeah, man. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you go online, give us a 5-star review. It's free to you, and it helps grow the podcast more than you know. We will see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.